happening tonight in Vancouver.
We had tried to mention over and over and over. There are many children missing.
Survivors speak as the ground radar report into the Tk'emlúps Indian residential school discovery is released.
The people who live where I live are asking the question, why has it not been done by now?
With the province just out of the pandemic state of emergency, BC's wildfire situation has some saying it's time for another.
Thanks to the extraordinary work Canadians have done getting vaccinated and following public health advice to get through the global COVID-19 pandemic, our government is now ready to announce that we are accelerating the timeline for resuming cruise ship activity.
Canada says it's getting ready to welcome cruise ships back into its waters again. Why that comes too late for the 2021 season.
This is City News Everywhere.
Good evening. Video capturing what appears to be a racist encounter outside a COVID vaccine clinic in Kelowna is now being investigated as a hate crime. And a warning, some people may find the comments in this video disturbing.
Shut up. Go back to your country. You're not a Canadian. You're not a Canadian.
You don't have to worry about that, man.
You are not a Canadian. You are disgusting.
I'm here on a permit, man. I'm not here like for no.
Go back to your country.
I'm not going back.
The video was posted by Infotel, and it shows a protester yelling at a Sikh security guard. He shouts at him to go back to India after he tried to stop protesters heckling those getting their shots. Police say they have identified the accused in the video. Kelowna RCMP and the Provincial Hate Crimes Unit are investigating. Anmal Singh is the security guard in the video, and City News spoke with him this afternoon. He's lived in Kelowna for 4 years and says this isn't the first time someone has spoken to him like this.
It doesn't happen like in a day-to-day basis, right? It just sometimes, and this is probably my second time I heard from someone like thing like go back to India or something, go back to a country, right? And like, I don't know, it just makes me feel sad, like how people can be just bad, you know, like, because that's what they are, like, you know, and that's what they feel, that's how they feel, right? So there's nothing I can do about it, but the only thing I can do is ignore, right? And that's what I did in that video.
Police are urging anyone who witnessed the incident to contact them.
The residential schools was built to beat our language, culture, and traditions out of us. It was meant to break up our families. We know our families were strong.
Survivors of Tk'emlúps Indian residential school speak as Tk'emlúps Secwépemc releases its ground-penetrating radar report into unmarked graves discovered at the school. The First Nation announced the discovery in May. Survivors say they had tried to raise the issue many times but weren't taken seriously. And a warning to our viewers, they may find some elements of this report disturbing.
The truth and reconciliation. I often wondered, what the hell does that mean? Do they want to hear the truth, really? We have tried to tell them the truth. And who are they? Who is going to listen? During our residential school settlement, we had tried to mention over and over and over, there are many children missing who did not reach home.
Ground-penetrating radar specialist Sarah Beaulier has used the technology to survey Indigenous and municipal cemeteries, as well as First World War internment sites for nearly a decade. She says her survey found 200 anomalies in just 2 acres of land. Beaulier says those anomalies have characteristics consistent with children's graves.
It fits with the knowledge keepers' descriptions of children having to dig graves, for one. It also fits with when you have a juvenile burial, because they are smaller in length. They typically are not dug as deeply. So the length would have been taken into account in addition to the depth of the burial as well.
She adds there are still 158 acres of land yet to be surveyed. The apple orchard where the radar was used was picked in part due to the discovery of a child's tooth and rib bone in the area decades ago. But Beaulier emphasized radar can't conclusively determine who's in those anomalies or confirm that they're graves. Only excavation or digging up the sites can accomplish that. Survivors say they don't want to see that happen. Chief Roseanne Cashmere says whatever the First Nation does, it'll be the community that decides.
We're going to be having the community consultation with our membership. And of course, there's been many questions surrounding, it being a crime scene and what those steps. First and foremost, it is about love, honor, and respect and dignity moving forward.
As for next steps, Cashmere has a very simple request for the federal government. Release attendance records for the Tk'emlúps school. That would allow the First Nation to start the painful work of determining which students suddenly disappeared. A 24-hour national Indian residential school crisis line continues to remain open to support residential school survivors and others affected. The number is listed on the bottom of your screen. In Ottawa, Shaoli Lee, City News.
Probably one of the most difficult years that we've ever encountered.
Staffing shortages in BC's tourism sector are at a critical level. Many business owners say they're cutting hours or closing for entire days just to keep their heads above water.
I'm announcing today that cruise ships will be allowed in Canadian waters as of November 1st of this year.
Canada's cruise ship ban is coming to an end this November 1st. The ban was put in place last year amid rising case counts of COVID-19. Thursday's announcement by the feds is welcome news for local businesses at ports like places in Vancouver. As you can see from behind me, it's been pretty empty.
This means that the cruise ship operators would be able to prepare and be ready for full operations by the start of the 2022 cruise season, if they can fully comply with public health requirements. It also means that our timing will be aligned with our American neighbors.
The ban was supposed to be lifted next February, so why is the date being pushed forward?
Every person who rolled up a sleeve to get vaccinated has helped us get to this point.
British Columbians here, we have the strongest cruise ship economy in the country. Thousands and thousands of people's jobs and livelihoods are attached to a strong and vibrant cruise ship industry.
Karen Soika is with Destination Vancouver. She says each cruise ship coming into Vancouver before the pandemic brought about $3 million in economic activity. So she's giving the announcement a thumbs up.
And also to cruisers, the traveler themselves, they want that confidence that our waters are reopened and that they can come back to Canada.
Celia Tang manages a jewelry store in Gastown, a 5-minute walk from Canada Place. She was thrilled to hear of a firm date, as things have been slow since the pandemic began. She admits the date means another summer loss, but she's excited for 2022.
I think every opening, everything helps. Even that the loss of the inter-provincial traveling helps too. So it will help. But November, I'm not sure. Summertime, definitely.
Vivek Sharma is the chair of the tourism industry of BC. He's cautiously optimistic. That's because he's also a bit concerned about an American bill allowing U.S. cruise ships to bypass our waters.
It definitely is an ongoing concern if that legislation becomes permanent. But we also are confident that from a consumer standpoint, there is, British Columbia has a beautiful product that we have on offer.
What are you looking forward to the most?
The more customer and the prosperity of our economy. Yeah, not only our store, I think the whole society.
In Vancouver, Rhea Renouf, City News.
We've also said that we understand very, very much Canadians' desire to be able to travel again.
Could the close sign at Canada's border soon come down? Ahead, we find how Canadians feel about the possibility of opening up its borders again.
4 coyotes have been euthanized in Stanley Park. Conservation officers say one of the animals was found very close to the site where a 2-year-old girl was bitten on Monday night. Several coyotes are believed to be linked to several recent attacks on humans in Stanley Park. And there are concerns the animals have been fed or have somehow lost their fear of people. Conservation officers say at least 2 more coyotes are still out there in Stanley Park.
We believe that the park is safer having now that we were able to remove those 4 coyotes, but it doesn't mean that we eliminate every possible threat. So it is very, very important that people remain very cautious in the park. If they choose to come in the park, they need to be aware of their surrounding and be ready to encounter possible aggressive coyote.
The remains of the 4 coyotes that were destroyed have been sent to the Animal Health Lab in Abbotsford for analysis.
Some of their utility buildings up top would be absolutely covered in those insects.
It's a sign of what's to come, a possible invasion of western hemlock looper moths. Is Metro Vancouver going to see another swarm this summer?
Trying to find staff is tricky.
It's a real thing. It is a crisis.
Staffing shortages in BC's tourism sector are at a critical level. Many business owners say they're cutting hours or closing for entire days just to keep their heads above water.
It's worse than we anticipated.
Karen Keynes runs a Dairy Queen in the popular BC tourist town of Vesuvius. Due to being seriously short-staffed, she's had to make the decision to close the dine-in option at her restaurant. And as of Sunday, will be doing drive-through only.
Suffering from staff shortages. There's also supply chain shortages. There's just a number of crises going on in the industry right now. I'm speaking from a place of food and beverage, of course, but I don't think it's unique to food and beverage.
Everyone's so excited to be open, and then they're faced with the fact that they can't really open to the maximum because of this.
Ellen Walker-Matthews with the Thompson Okanagan Tourism Association says that staffing has been a struggle for tourism destinations across the board, and everyone is trying to find ways to cope with the worker shortage.
I know the hotels are trying to reduce the amount of housekeeping service that they provide, that kind of thing. Maybe more order up and pick up your food and beverage rather than always having, but if you don't have a cook in the kitchen, there's no food coming out, right? So you just need and you can't work people 7 days a week. That's not an option that anybody wants to consider. So we really need staff.
Here at Steamworks in Gastown, operator Carl McCreath says downtown Vancouver's tourism sector seems to be getting off to a slower start than in the Okanagan this summer. But despite the delayed comeback, he says he is also finding it extremely difficult to staff his pub.
Constant ads, interview, hire as quick as possible. Try to really focus on the training. Want to make sure they have a good training experience and just try to build the schedule up. And we're keeping up with the sales, but it's close. It's like a race between the two for having enough people for the sales coming in.
For now, the message from operators is a plea for patience from the public as they try and adapt to the lack of staff.
Our season's just getting started. We've got another 2 good months of this, and it's that we just all need to get creative already to change the way that we're doing things. And I think this is a common theme that shouldn't be unfamiliar to most.
In Vancouver, Ashley Burr, City News. The provincial government is taking action against the opioid crisis by expanding access to a safer supply of drugs. BC claims it's the first province in Canada to take the step. This new prescribed safer supply policy will roll out through a phased approach, starting with existing health authority funded programs that currently prescribe alternatives to illicit drugs. Phase 1 is expected to take 18 to 24 months as data is collected to see how well it's working. BC's top doctor says Phase 1 will also focus on gathering information and readjusting according to what is working and what isn't.
Right now, the focus needs to be on developing the evidence, knowing what medications are working best and what people need, and supporting the prescribers that are already in the system.
Around 7,000 people have lost their lives to toxic drug supply in BC in recent years. 851 of those deaths were this year alone. There are 54 new cases of COVID-19 across the province tonight, and no new deaths have been reported in the last day. 63 people are currently in hospital, 12 are in intensive care. 80.5% of all eligible adults in BC have had their first dose. 51.9% are fully vaccinated.
Constantly reviewing the measures at the border, receiving advice from Dr. New, from Dr. Tam.
As the federal government remains mum on the next steps regarding the U.S.-Canada border, a new poll suggests we remain leery about letting traffic flow freely again. 7 in 10 Canadians want at least 3/4 of the country to be fully vaccinated before allowing non-essential travel between Canada and the U.S. Conversely, 22% want the open sign turned on immediately. But the federal government has said nothing regarding extending border closure beyond next Wednesday.
Vaccination rates have to continue to go up as they are. We're very encouraged, obviously, by the last number of weeks, but that trend needs to continue.
Earlier this month, the government removed mandatory quarantines for fully vaccinated travelers returning to Canada. The survey found more than half of all Canadians support that move.
And we have said we're prepared to take additional progressive steps over the coming weeks and months as it's safe to do so.
The survey also found fear subsiding, with 53% no longer concerned with the virus. Still, health officials are observing other countries battling resurgent COVID cases, many driven by variants. But the impact on hospitals has not been nearly as dire.
All the evidence that we've seen to date showed that they haven't really been more severe in terms of causing a more severe outcomes overall compared to, let's say, the original strain.
Overall, 88% believe the worst of the pandemic is behind us. But for those who hold on to some anxiety, the hope is to have cases vanish or to push to full vaccinations over 70% before they really feel at ease. To get there may require doses for Canadians 12 and under, an issue officials continue to monitor.
There's clinical trials underway. There's obviously a submission that needs to be made to our regulator, Health Canada, and then obviously their due diligence in terms of looking through the data and then subsequently, hopefully, approving the vaccine. But
Scott Frolick, City News, Edmonton.
Getting vaccinated? Well, the next drink is on them. Steamworks in Gastown is offering a beer, wine, or highball to anyone who comes in on their vaccination day. Operator Carl McCreath says it was a no-brainer to celebrate and encourage people to get the jab.
There's a vaccination center over at Canada Place, so we're close enough with the C-bus and everything nearby. And literally from the point that the vaccines came out, we did it right out of the gates. And I'm probably doing, I don't know, 20 to 30 a day. So a fair amount, you know, a pretty good size number. But we think the promos worth it. We're pretty happy with it.
A major milestone in the province's COVID-19 recovery in Abbotsford last night as the Fraser Valley Bandits of the Canadian Elite Basketball League became the first professional sports team in BC to welcome fans back into the building. A sellout crowd of 1,800 spectators were allowed through the doors Wednesday night as the Bandits played host to the Guelph Nighthawks.
We feel great. Like we get to be at the front of the return for sports and the event industry and the tourism industry. Like we feel for all the people that have been on the sidelines for the last year, while the frontline workers have been at the forefront of getting us to this point. So the energy is high. Like you can already tell, fans here are super excited.
I'm feeling really excited. You know, it's light's almost at the end of a tunnel. We're getting back towards normalcy. Just can't wait to go watch some basketball.
I think it's really great. I'm actually really excited because I haven't been to one of these in a long time. I think it's really great to have sports opening back up. It just feels more normal and stuff.
Fraser Valley won the game 92-71. Their next home game is July 23rd against Hamilton.
Some of their utility buildings up top would be absolutely covered in those insects.
If these creepy crawlies are making you shiver right now, you may want to brace yourself for what's coming later this summer. Western hemlock looper moths and their larvae are hungry right now, and experts warn swarms of them could be coming to BC in just weeks. You can find the larvae dangling from hemlock trees, and you'll see the full-grown moths in a few weeks.
Last year, it was these moths that were flying. It was an army of moths that were flying towards light at night, and they were everywhere. especially on the North Shore. And these moths would have laid eggs on those trees, and now these eggs have hatched, and now we have these little larvae that are hungry, and they're basically feeding on the foliage.
Richard Hamlin says the outbreak hasn't spread to other parts of BC, but it could with more dry summers and heat waves.
And it makes for a pretty graphic video, but it's not going to hurt or damage anything except for the local foliage.
Pest Control Solutions is getting calls from homeowners and says there's not much people can do but close windows and turn off patio lights. But there are concerns with the larvae eating away at trees. It could also be potentially dangerous during wildfire season.
So you'll see a lot of the foliage which has been damaged or dead, and we started adding a lot of that dry material down towards the canopy floor, and so we're adding fuel.
It was a nice source of entertainment for this father's young children last year.
They would shake these branches, literally tens of thousands of moths would be covering our backyard, and it was like they were chasing and popping bubbles in our property, which was a lot of fun for them, but somewhat concerning for my wife and myself.
He says, don't panic and use pesticides. You'll kill the moths and surrounding trees. So for what may look like a pending horror scene, you just have to wait it out.
What you can usually expect is about 1 to 3 years of it being pretty annoying, and then we'll probably get about a decade break before that actually occurs again.
In North Vancouver, Crystal Adiris, City News.
The early and intense wildfire season in BC has calls for government to call a state of emergency continuing. The voices include the Thompson-Nicola Regional District and the leader of the opposition.
We have new fires emerging every single day. What I want to make sure of is that every single tool, every single resource that can be brought to bear, that happens.
The latest wildfire status isn't good. More than 300 blazes around the province, dozens of evacuation alerts or orders, and BC Wildfire Service saying essentially the province's fire season is a month ahead of schedule in the bad way. The number of fires we usually see in August are already here.
The state of emergency allows for the removal of any barriers.
But Bond admits that nothing has been missed with the provincial response to date. Still, she's worried where people ousted from their homes will go. The province insists no additional powers were needed to respond to devastating fire seasons in 2003, 2017, or 2018 and aren't now, saying if a provincial emergency was not declared during those events, it would not have changed our response in any way. The already struggling tourism and hotel sectors worried about the fires for the affected communities, but also the ramifications of unnecessarily scaring people wanting to visit BC.
It's interesting to me that I don't think you're hearing a request for a state of emergency coming from the people who are dealing with the emergency. It's coming from other bodies.
Overall, the most challenging part is messaging, she says, where there's uncertainty, especially for those coming from out of province.
It's important that there is the right amount of messaging that goes along with it, so that people don't think the entire province of BC is on fire, and there are places on the province which can be visited safely.
What is the air clarity? Is there any travel restrictions in place? Are the highways safe?
Both say they're working with communities, Emergency Management BC, and government to help those in fire areas who need it and to reassure travelers. But for Bond, it's not enough. She wants a state of emergency called for this fire season like it has been in the past.
The people who live where I live are asking the question, why has it not been done by now?
For City News in Victoria, I'm News 1130's Lisa Yusta.
Vancouver's news is always available on the radio with News 1130 or online anytime at citynews1130.com. Your next edition of City News is tonight at 11. Thank you for watching and have a great night.